It's not something where they were able to break the myth about trans bodies, but they just deliberately created a space for themselves to kind of throw their ideas about, seeing trans people as just a second term citizens. And imagine an adult person walking into a boardroom and sitting in front of them and stripping their underpants and showing it to them that what exactly lies between the thighs is such a atrocious kind of things to kind of put it across. I think kind of say that, okay, this procedures has to be done on your body, that's when you are completely trans, and that's when we will give you a trans certificate or trans identity, is very problematic in its own nature. Tried to meet the Minister of Social Justice. The minister was not present. And there was some other bureaucrat called as Yogita who was taking the entire conversation and also blatantly saying that, we know what we are supposed to give.
In a moment marked by both legislative change and deep unease within the queer community, the recently passed Transgender Persons Amendment Bill 2026 has sparked intense debate across the country. While the government positions it as a step forward, the trans and non-binary community see it as a setback to dignity and rights. Today, the Federal speaks with Patroni Chidanananda Shastri, a Hyderabad-based drag artist, performance storyteller, and vocal queer rights advocate on the issue. Patroni's work blends art and activism, giving visibility to the marginalized identities while challenging societal norms. Welcome to the Federal, Patroni, and thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for having me at Federal, and I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Patroni, first of all, please describe the spectrum briefly, LGBTIQ+. The reason I ask you is important because the lack of awareness has a major role to play when it comes to such developments.
So let me just kind of put the LGBTQIA plus spectrum into like two buckets. L, G, B are basically the sexuality part, and T is something which is a gender part. So L is for lesbian. If it's a cis woman, you kind of in love with another cis woman, then they are called as lesbian. Gay is a two man or two people who are of masculine identity, kind of in a lover relationship. And B is someone which means bisexual, who are attracted to all the kinds of gender, irrespective of masculinity or femininity. Now, T is something which is a transgender. Transgender is a word where someone who is born with a certain sex assigned at birth, at their age or the age of adulting, figures out that their body is not matching with what the body they are in is not matching with the soul. So I think that is when the word trans kind of comes in. Sometimes people take sexual corrective surgeries to align themselves, to feel that their body is aligning with their own soul. And other times people try to use some other measures like, gender affirming, dressing, or, kind of creating a space for themselves to ensure that they are trans as well and trans enough and would be able to affirm their own gender. So transgender is somebody who has this deflection or dysphoria of gender from their body which they are given at birth and what they see themselves in a mirror. Whereas sexuality, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, and other sexualities which are like pansexuals, etc., is something which they do on a bed. So these are two very different kind of I think orientations which we should be very aware of.
Okay. So the government has positioned this as a very progressive bill. So why there is such strong resistance from the community? What objections do you have to the bill, and what is the action, or the plan going forward?
Yeah, so I think, as of now, the government is basically listening to their own drum rolls and feeling that, that is something which has been, given as a very progressive state. Having said that, there was no consultation, no conversation which happened within the LGBTQIA plus community, although there's no representation to start with. So it's just like, your kid is asking you for a certain kind of a chocolate and you give a different brand altogether. So it's just like that. We have been hand off something which is their perspective of mansplaining and not something which we really require. So let me kind of debrief the bill and what exactly the bill basically talks about as well. Like, previous to this bill, the trans gender protection act, or transgender protection bill, was basically categorizing anyone who is a part of the trans larger umbrella, which includes people who are a trans woman, people who are trans man, people who identify as gender queer, gender non-binary, and people also from the socio-economic cultural groups like Hijra, Koti communities, Khwaja Sarais, etc. All of them are being categorized into trans umbrella, saying that anyone who self-identify themselves as trans would be considered as transgender person, from the point of view of the government. Having said that, there is an urgent need. I don't know why exactly there's a very urgent need for the government to kind of change this and restrict the trans umbrella into a very cognitive, very constructive box, which makes it very suffocating for people like me and a lot of others to navigate. They come from a very pathological idea of transness, like what they been hearing about, rumors about trans people for ages, is what they have put it in their brain and try to write a bill around it. It's not something where they were able to break the myth about trans bodies, but they just deliberately created a space for themselves to kind of throw their ideas about seeing trans people as just a second term citizens and not someone who are a part of the larger group of ecosystem. Here this particular bill says that only certain socio-economic groups such as Koti, Hijra, Aravini, and Aravini is not a very generalized term in Tamil Nadu, though Aravini is something which they categorized as a sub socio-economic group from Tamil Nadu, but nobody uses this word or this particular spaces. So these are the social economic groups, are the ones whom they considered as transgender persons, and anyone out of it are not considered as transgender person, which includes trans man, trans masculine or trans man people are the larger group of the trans umbrella, so they have been ripped off their particular rights. Same with gender non-binary people as well, gender queer people as well. And then the other atrocious part is penalties for someone who is supporting a trans person. So it says that anyone voluntarily or involuntarily supporting a trans person, or helping a trans person to get converted medically, they can be penalized for 10 years, whereas raping a trans person is just for 2 years. So this is how draconian this law is, that this amendment is. And I think that is something which is why there's a lot of opposition, because here nobody is consulted. You're just giving a food to a person who doesn't even know what exactly the person would eat. So it's really important that there has to be a consultation from the trans people. There has to be a gender diverse people in a room where they discuss and understand, and not give something from a man's perspective, because they don't know the pains which we kind of go through as a community.
What about the role of the medical board? I believe they also have been given, a role to play in certifying that whether or not you qualify as a trans person.
Now they say that there is a medical board, they would be associating these boards, but let's understand how India is currently functioning. Even for getting a transgender certificate, it takes around 6 to 7 months for them to kind of get the access to transgender certificates, because that's how bureaucratic this entire process is. Now imagine if there is a medical board which has been put across in for certifying gender diverse people or trans people. How will this board be functioned? Who is the one who would be taking care, or the central figure of all the boards? Imagine each and every time a trans person will walk into a medical facility, or towards the medical board, strip them off, show what exactly is their genitalia, and then kind of come. This is such a tiring, tedious, as well as stressing process for a trans person to go through. And I think there was also some conversations which a couple of MPs have raised, that at the time of birth you get a birth certificate, but at the time of birth you're a child, you're a kid, and you don't have the consciousness of going ahead in front of a doctor and they getting certification. Whereas trans people usually kind of transition at the time of their pre-adults or post-adults. And imagine an adult person walking into a boardroom and sitting in front of them and stripping their underpants and showing it to them, that what exactly lies between the thighs, is such a atrocious kind of things to kind of put it across. And I think that is the biggest problem which nobody is trying to concern. Now there might be chances that these boards can turn into something very very problematic for trans people. Imagine the board just wants to, the members of the board who just wants to harass and rape trans people each and every time they're trying to go ahead and come. And then the board doesn't even have a very stringent idea, like they have to still go ahead and report it to the district magistrate. So what if the district magistrate is not able to pick up these cases as and when it's kind of coming? So there's a loophole which they're trying to put in across, so that we don't have a proper way of seeking help, and then they don't have to help us because we don't have a channel. So it's like denying the requirements, of denying the very basic fact of support to the trans people, but just then by just putting trans people into a loop which will never end. So I think that is why they are putting this particular medical board, and trying to justify that they would be the one who would be basically doing good for the community. But on the other hand, it's just like we will all be victimized by these boards who will be policing our bodies.
It's problematic that how your identity is defined and certified. And how does this really impact the lived realities of trans individuals, the grassroots level?
Yeah, so I need to tell you that to get gender reassignment surgeries, there are multiple factors which are involved, which includes the body condition of the individual, the age of the person, the health conditions. People might have diabetes, people might have HIV, and there are a lot of other complications. So usually, what happens is, like, even when a trans person is walking into a doctor for getting gender reassignment surgery, not always that they would be approved of the same, because there might be some other complications. There are times where trans people who come out around 50 or 60 years of age, and then for them to medically transition is impossible. So it's really important that this fetishization of medical interventions on the body makes a lot of pressure for individuals who are kind of coming out. It's not a safe space anymore. Here, they have to figure out how much and how they can kind of alter the body, and it takes a lot of money. Like, it's not something which any trans person from any rural space can kind of go and think about. Sexual reassignment surgeries. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of backing of family or safety net. So just putting a box that only surgically aligned people are trans people and rest all of them are not, and then also to kind of say that, okay, this procedures has to be done on your body, that's when you are completely trans, and that's when we will give you a trans certificate or trans identity, is very problematic in its own nature. And I think the implications are, as of now, we were all been having transgender certificates. There were more than half of the community is already accessing the benefits of transgender certificate, or at least self-aligning themselves. They're living with the families. Like, I live with my family. I am very happy. I'm out in my company. I'm able to kind of navigate my transness, my queerness in a far more better way than I could have ever imagined. And now, after these many years, somebody is trying to take that access out of me and shatter my space into such a hell that I can't even go ahead and cry about it. So I think here the impact is very real on real people. Here the impact is on community workers who help trans people, trans individuals who are coming from rural areas, educate them about transness, or educate them about, give them access, give them support. Now, anybody who's giving a support is also being seen from a criminal lens, and can have their work being jeopardized on, and the government can basically put them behind the bars as well. So it's very direct attack on trans people and how trans people are navigating their regular life. And I think as of now, we are all in panic, we are all in pain. We don't know what exactly should be the very next steps, because we don't even have trust in the court as well anymore. Because we also know that from the last few things which are happening consecutively on the Supreme Court as well, it is painted in a similar way how exactly we have been seeing it from the Parliament as well. So it's very it's very murky situations for us. But one thing which we always know is, like, even whatever the bill is passed, or whatever bill was there in the past as well, we were able to navigate our own self. Trans people were always existed in any kind of oppression, any kind of stigma, and we will continue to do that because our elders or our people from our communities are aware of things which they can pass down to our generation, and we will still carry that out. We'll keep on our fight, and we'll be able to carry that out with that same spirit.
Okay. Uh, you also said that the bill was passed without adequate consultation. What does a meaningful consultation look like in this context?
Yeah, I think the government itself has created this board, which is the National Portal for Transgender Persons, and these are employed by the government. Having said that, this bill was not present to any of the people from the board. So even when the bill was presented in Parliament, some of the board members tried to make a connection with the with the Minister of Social Justice. So they reached out. They've been called at around 2 o'clock at late night to be present in Delhi. They all kind of went there, flying back, and then tried to meet the Minister of Social Justice. The minister was not present. And there was some other bureaucrat called as Yogita who was taking the entire conversation and also blatantly saying that we know what we are supposed to give. So there were times where there were interventions happening from multiple spaces, like even recently there is this Supreme Court's panel which was for a different case altogether been put, and there were people who were basically the panel Supreme Court panel has also asked the government to take the bill back, but then these were been unheard. You got the major opposition speaking in both the houses. There were people who were speaking from all other parties, but none of those comments were being documented or taken or at least given an ear. I think I'm trying to understand, why is this urgency? Is it because we are trying to kind of go ahead and follow a template of the so-called friend of our Prime Minister Trump into India? Is what I kind of constantly kind of question. Like, is it something which they are trying to deliberately do because US is doing it? So there is not a very specific way of helping trans people. Now, what a consultation would have looked like is, if they know that this is for a community, the first thing it should have been done is to put it across to the national portal for transgender people, National Commission for Transgender People, and it have been discussed over there. Then if they are not even satisfied with that, they could have put it on a standing committee, and then how exactly this law was made. It was made from these kind of a discussions in the very first place. So I think those were the similar templates which they could have followed. But then it is just a man who's trying to kind of go ahead and put his own brain and mansplain each and everyone about what transgender person is, without them knowing what we actually go through, and giving us some kind of things which would basically suppress us and oppress us than do any kind of a benefit. So I think that is where the intent is coming from.
Okay. How do you see this bill affecting access to healthcare, employment, and legal protection for trans persons on the ground? I think you partially, responded to that, but if you can again talk about it in elaborately.
I think regarding the healthcare, legal as well as the other facilities which trans people were accessing, one of the biggest, I think, setback is regarding the health system. There are a lot of organizations who help individuals, who help trans people, who educate them about the process of transitioning. There are, gender corrective care which is being given, like the hormone therapy, for example. Even HIV treatment, for example. So these are some of the services which are provided by NGOs, which are provided by the social sector teams, which are also provided by private organizations, etc. Now, what this bill would do is create an unbiased kind of a fear across all these people who are working. Now, we don't know whether helping a trans person can make us a criminal in front of the government, because it's a very clear, part in the bill which says that anybody who's trying to influence, or anybody who's trying to convert someone, with force, is would be kind of penalized for 10 years or more than that. I think that is very bizarre in its own nature. That doesn't come from the fact that how trans individuals navigate or seek support in the healthcare. And now what exactly is just doing is, it's just kind of creating this panic and doubt whether one should help as a healthcare provider, but whether one could give that kind of a support to people, when somebody is reaching out. So I think those are some of the dilemmas which are put across the health providers to kind of start with. They're also, legally, I think one of the first reactions would be like going directly to the Supreme Court and filing, PILs, etc. But that is also not something which is recommended, as I have already told that we don't have that trust in Supreme Court anymore. Yeah, I think it's really important that we reconsider and understand what should be done legally as well. There are a lot of legal battles which have happened in multiple states. Like there were a lot of legal remedies which were being put in all these kind of states. Now it's really confusing for us to kind of understand and see which particular verdict will match with what instance. Like in Andhra Pradesh, for example, they have given that trans woman are woman by the Andhra High Court, and now this particular bill basically kind of terminates the idea that transgender people are someone who's been gender corrected. They don't get a label of a trans woman or a trans man. Trans man were anyways notified. So I think now placing these two together and trying to match and see what exactly is the right of a trans person itself makes it very caucasus in its own nature. So I think these are some of these issues which people have to navigate as of now.
As an artist, as an activist, how do you plan to use this major development in your art to respond to it?
So I think it's also a fear for artists as well at this point in time, because anything which we do or which we kind of put it across can basically put us into jeopardizing situation. I think it's really important for us to kind of reassess and think about how we are kind of presenting it across. But I think one of the biggest power which artist has is to kind of manipulate. They can manipulate at any point in time their work. They can ensure that they are fitting into the mold of what is required at the time of the at the time of the space. Artists have been in spaces like this before. It's not the first time, and even worse spaces like this before. They were there. Drag artists were there when the World War II was happening. And there are still a lot of drag artists who are navigating their own lives and their own art form in spaces like the US and the UK, where similar kind of laws have been passed. So I think it's a global model. Like we as artists need to kind of always acknowledge that change is something which is happening, and this is our documentary era, if I could say it in that way, because this is where our actual intent of art comes. This is where either we live as an artist or die as an artist. So I think that is a time which we need to kind of see. When we kind of make it, we need to be very bold. We need to kind of say what the community needs to listen. We need to create that hope when the hope is when the world is seeing us as hopeless persons. We need to ignite the I would say inspiration between our own community and pull them up. So I think those are some of these things which I am trying to radiate. I do understand it's a very painful time, that there are a lot of young people who are watching or kind of having a lot of things in their mind. But as an artist, I should not add up to the pain. I need to bring them out, give them the queer joy, and then get them back to work so that they can agitate, they can put their voice out and make a real change. So I think that is the onus of artist at this point in time. I think the base of any law is self-identification. It's really important that a law speaks by the people and not against the people. It's really important that individuals who would be benefited with the law need to ask for what they want, and that to be given. Whereas it should not be like I haven't asked for anything, and then all of a sudden you are showering me something which I might not like as well. It's just like giving a sweet to a diabetic patient. I think this is really important for us to kind of understand when we are creating laws, when we are amending laws. It's really important to check with who exactly this law would be benefiting, and do we have a discussion with them? Do we understand from where they are kind of coming from? So I think those are some of the aspects which makes a good law. And as of now, I think I'm still hopeful. There are a lot of good countries who have included trans people in a far more better way. India was one of them. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it is not. So I think that we'll get back, we'll get our spaces back. We'll be able to kind of make that true change and get what we require. And I think I'm hopeful on my movement and my people, and I'm sure that they will make a great difference.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Patroni. Voices like yours remind us that policy is not just about law, it's about lived realities, dignity, and the right to self identify. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.